In the final days of 1989, the Soviet Union assembled a lead carrier task force composed of multiple warships bound for Cuba. They had reached an agreement to establish a sphere of influence in the region, leveraging Cuba's strategic position to project power across the Caribbean. The deployment was more than symbolic. It was a direct challenge to American naval supremacy. Soviet aircraft launched from Cuban air bases, and the Soviet fleet operating in the Atlantic routinely intercepted civilian flights. What began as routine patrols quickly evolved into a campaign of harassment against civilian air traffic. Commercial airliners flying between the United States, the Caribbean, and South America found themselves shadowed by Soviet fighters. Their unannounced presence made the United States worried that they would shoot down any aircraft that did not respond to their intercepts. U.S. merchant and cargo vessels transiting the busy routes through the Caribbean and Florida Straits found themselves increasingly harassed by both Soviet warships and Cuban patrol boats. The Soviet torpedo and patrol boats would frequently shadow these vessels at dangerously close distances, while Cuban patrol boats that were smaller, faster, and more agile would dart in and out of the merchant ship's path, forcing them to make sudden course adjustments. Oil tankers became their next primary target. These vital ships, carrying crude oil through the Florida Straits to U.S. refineries, were increasingly intercepted by Cuban patrol boats and Soviet warships. The Soviets, using a combination of naval and air assets, began shadowing these tankers in a concerted effort to disrupt their passage. This escalated quickly, and the United States Navy increased their presence more in the Florida Straits with more warship patrols. The Soviet Ka-27 helicopters, primarily used for anti-submarine warfare, were now deployed in greater numbers to shadow U.S. Navy vessels operating in the area. With their distinctive twin-rotor design, these helicopters would appear suddenly, skimming the waves, and then circle American warships, hovering at low altitudes to observe the movements of U.S. forces. The Americans, having dealt with Soviet naval harassment for months, now face the added challenge of persistent aerial surveillance. The growing frequency and proximity of these Soviet helicopters pushed the U.S. Navy to take a more aggressive posture, as the boundary between provocative maneuvers and outright hostility became dangerously blurred. The tension in the Caribbean reached a critical point in February when a Cuban patrol boat, operating in close coordination with Soviet forces, attacked a U.S. fishing vessel that failed to respond to repeated radio calls. The attack on a civilian vessel was a dramatic escalation in the already tense region. The trawler had been flagged under U.S. jurisdiction, and the crew had been operating in international waters, where they were legally entitled to be. This event caused tensions in the region to rise, and within 72 hours, the United States sent a carrier strike group to patrol the region, hoping that the strike group would deter any Soviet and Cuban aggression for a period of time. But the Soviets didn't back down, and they increased their air patrols around the strike group, getting within 10 miles of the carrier strike group, keeping an eye on American aggression and intervention in the Florida Straits. This prompted the Americans to pursue a plan for action, and the first war games were drawn up and simulated for a strike against Cuba. Weeks of mounting tensions in the Caribbean exploded into open conflict when a Sovereignty-class destroyer, operating under direct Soviet orders, launched a sudden and unprovoked attack on a U.S. Navy escort group. By the time the attack subsided, 3 ships had been lost, another severely damaged, and hundreds of U.S. sailors dead. The attack on an American naval escort group was a direct act of war, leaving little doubt that the Soviet Union was escalating beyond provocation into outright aggression, and the Pentagon's response would be aggressive.